Chapter 454 to 455. Because there were no deaths in the incident, and because the Konoha Umbu pretty much knew who the culprit of the attack on the two Chunin was. Therefore, the actions of Kimimaro did not cause any commotion. And because Kuroto provided the intelligence of Kagaya Takashi in a timely manner, therefore, nothing major about that incident happened except for a warning that the leader of the Otogekyure squad received to make sure that his subordinates remain in check. In this regard, Kuroto can also understand that Hokage-sama seems to have no intention of creating conflict with Otogekyure. However, small the newly created shinobi village Otogekyure may seem, Sandaime does not have any intention to create any conflict with Otogekyure either way. The attack on Kakashi has already proved that Akatsuki organization is showing signs of making their move again. So the more difficult the situation, the more calm and collected Sandaime will have to be, else it would be too devastating for the village. So, after receiving the intelligence on Kagaya Takashi, the matter was not pursued any further. Early next morning, Kuroto left a shadow clone of his in the village to act as his replacement, then quietly sneaked out of Konoha with the newly obtained samples of Kimimaro's cells. Flying all the way, Kuroto soon arrived at the air fortress flying on the east side of the Land of Fire. During this period of time, under the control of Sandaime Kazekage, the air fortress has been hidden inside the cover of dense rain clouds and drifting over the sea. Because it has been hidden fairly well inside the rain clouds, and because there are hundreds of seal enchantments covering the air fortress, therefore, no one has been able to see or locate Anchor Vantion as of yet. Of course, this is not without its own disadvantages. The long-term hiding inside the rain clouds has caused continuous exposure to moisture, which further results in corrosion of the outer structure of the air fortress. The defensive enchantments that have been active 24/7 have prevented the corrosion quite a lot, but there is only so much that can be prevented. The defensive enchantments that remain active 24/7 cause a lot of chakra consumption, and it's only because of the existence of Morio that has been sealed in the energy room that such high chakra requirements are met. Otherwise, not only the air fortress would have been detected long ago, it would have even fallen down. After arriving at the air fortress, Kuroto first checked the current status of chimera buds he had planted a while ago. And as he expected, among all the chimera buds he had planted, 2 buds successfully combined with his cells, thus making them suitable to be transplanted into his body for the chimera jutsu. Looking at the 2 successful buds, although Kuroto is happy that he is a step closer to the fusion ceremony, Kuroto knows that he can't be as reckless as Hiriko was because these buds have a tendency to even swallow the host. I will have to be cautious when dealing with them, thought Kuroto. The immature chimera buds may seem harmless at first or second sight, but Kuroto knows better than anyone that these buds are actually monsters that are capable of truly fusing the flesh and blood of several people into the host. Once such a monster gets out of control, it is difficult to imagine how disastrous the consequences will be. Kuroto has gained a deeper level of understanding of chimera buds after research and development over the past few months. No matter what he has been doing, the matter of chimera buds has never once left his mind. The approach that Hiriko used in dealing with the chimera buds was clearly seen and then repeatedly postulated by Kuroto. According to Hiriko's approach, he relaxed the restrictions on chimera buds to enhance the fusion ability of flesh and blood to increase the success rate of the ceremony. Of course, from a certain perspective, there is nothing wrong with Hiriko's approach. After all, in the field of science, the success rate matters most. After all, if the experiment itself results in a failure, then what's the point? That is to say, if Hiriko's existence itself would have been erased, then what would have been the point of there being hidden dangers present or not in his experiment? They would have been meaningless, right? Therefore, first, the experiment is carried out keeping the highest success rate in mind, which Hiriko did. Afterward, the subsequent improvements in various parameters are made to eliminate the hidden dangers while keeping the same success rate in mind, and later the success rate is further increased. Hiriko followed the first step, but unfortunately for him, he won't be able to proceed to the second step or the third step, because once a subject is tested, then there is no going back for that particular subject. So, the state Hiriko is in is fixed, and even if Hiriko may have estimated the hidden dangers of the chimera buds, he obviously underestimates them. The chimera buds are monsters. They are true chimera-like creatures that are capable of fusing flesh and blood, but the problem is that their ability to fuse flesh and blood is too strong and sort of instinctual. At the same time, they have independent consciousness. This independent consciousness normally helps the host in healing the injuries and protects the host while he is unconscious, but they are also capable of forcibly taking control of the host's body and consciousness, which can be extremely harmful. And it might become difficult at some point to judge whether it is the original host that is controlling the chimera buds in his body, or the chimera buds controlling the host. And the stronger the host, the stronger the chimera buds will be. Therefore, Kuroto knows that he must be extremely cautious when dealing with these seemingly harmless creatures who are not so different from Venom of the Spider-Man verse. Rubbing his chin, Kuroto thought inwardly, "It seems that I will need to use someone for step 2, in order to further improve and correct all the parameters to make the experiment safer, at the same time also improve the rate of success of the operation." Kuroto really admires the courage of Hiriko to dare to cross the river by feeling the stones. But on the path to godhood, there is no return. It's either success at the end, a partial success that is a dead end, or simply death. So, Kuroto cannot do what Hiriko did, else only death will give him another chance. Therefore, Kuroto needs a pawn, a sacrificial pawn who hopes to become the king, but is completely unaware that a pawn can never become a king in a game of chess. Who can be the most suitable pawn? Was the thought in Kuroto's mind as several candidates appeared in Kuroto's mind in a flash. Of course, not just anyone can be a good pawn. He should be a capable person, but not capable enough, else he will be difficult to control. He should be knowledgeable, at the same time should not be knowledgeable enough, else he won't be a good pawn because he would realize that he is being used. And yes, the pawn must have enough financial power because his pockets will be cut loose in his false hope of becoming the king. What's most important is that the pawn must be ambitious enough. In fact, the first three criteria are not that important. What's most important is ambition. When Kuroto thinks about it, there is only one person who matches all the four criteria. And when Kuroto thinks of his name, his lips curl into an evil smirk. It's time for you to play your part, Shimura Danzo. Shimura Danzo is the kind of man who will not hesitate to use the Chimera Jutsu upon himself. Kuroto can be sure about this. After all, the man has no bottom line. He actually dared to transplant Sharingan and Hashirama cells into his body. On a side note, Shimura Danzo is also one of the high-level leaders of Konoha, so he has a lot of political power and financial resources in his hand. He is capable of investing large funds in the further development of Chimera Jutsu. He is also capable and knowledgeable enough, but is not knowledgeable enough, as he often relies on Orochimaru and other researchers to achieve his objective. And what's more important is that he is an ambitious man. Even in his decaying old age, he still dreams to become Hokage and spends all his effort towards it. At the same time, he has no bottom line for it. After all, the man actually dared to issue several missions with the objective of assassinating Sandaime Hokage. So he is definitely the pawn Kuroto is looking for. Others might be able to resist the temptations of Chimera Jutsu, but Shimura Danzo, who has been trying to acquire this jutsu for such a long time, won't be able to resist the temptations, especially if Kuroto considers the recent restrictions Sandaime has placed on Shimura Danzo and his root subunit. With that understood, Kuroto sealed a copy of the scroll of Chimera Jutsu along with the incomplete Chimera buds that have no cell of his into a storage scroll and thought, I guess I can sell this to Shimura Danzo for a good price that should be between 150 million Ryo to 200 million Ryo. It is not too expensive and not cheap either. After dealing with the matter of Chimera buds, Kuroto put it aside for now and focused his attention on the Wind Nature clone, and started to carry out the cell fusion process for the Wind Nature clone. As always, before carrying out the actual cell fusion process, Kimamaro's cells need to be filtered in order to remove or decrease the potency of other chakra natures except for the wind chakra nature. At the same time, because Kimamaro's cells also contain Orochimaru's cursed seal of earth, therefore, the cursed seal of earth that contains Orochimaru's chakra needs to be removed too, so the whole filtration process took 3 days in total. Among the 200 cell samples that Kuroto used, 17 groups successfully survived the filtration process while still maintaining their strong vitality. In the process of filtration, Kuroto found that Kimamaro's cells contained very large proportions of yang chakra, so despite the repeated filtration, a potent yang chakra still remained in his cells. This is also natural. After all, Shikatsumiyaku Kekkei Genkai, which is the manipulation of the skeletal structure of the body, is heavily dependent on the yang chakra nature. And this is also in line with Kuroto's theory of the Kagaya clan representing the yang part of Hamura's descendants. And as per Kuroto's analysis of the yang chakra present in Kimamaro's cells, the physique of Kagaya clan members is second only to the Senju clan and Uzumaki clan. After obtaining these results, Kuroto continued further, and since the filtration process went smoothly, then he proceeded to the next step, which is the most difficult of all, the cell fusion process. While creating the fire clone, Kuroto encountered too many troubles, and no matter how much effort he put, there was no success except for one clone with the female gender. Left with no other option, Kuroto had to compromise and chose the Tsukihei clone. However, the cell fusion process for the wind clone went unexpectedly smooth, too smooth that Kuroto was extremely surprised. Of the 17 samples, 10 samples successfully fused and still retained high vitality. Achieving such a result, even Kuroto was taken aback because all these 10 samples can be used to create the cloning bud and start the cultivation in order to cultivate the clone. It seems that my theory was indeed correct. The Hyuga clan and the Kagaya clan are indeed distant relatives, was the conclusion in Kuroto's mind. There were rumors and speculations before about two great shinobi clan, the Hyuga and the Kagaya, being closely related to each other for generations. But the communication between the two clans is completely in the hands of the main family, and Kuroto, who is a member of the branch family, does not have much knowledge about this. Moreover, due to the two clans being part of different nations, the two clans have become quite distant from one another over the years, especially after the village system was started. Not to mention the impact of the three great shinobi wars that have taken place in the past few decades. The two clans that were once closely related to each other are now completely broken from one another with no communication left whatsoever, so there's not much one can guess. But the results of the experimentations in front of him clearly point out that the Hyuga clan and Kagaya clan are closely related to each other. Don't just rely on visual perception. Sense of smell and sound that you hear are also the source of information about an enemy's movements. And make sure that you are not always dependent on these senses. as these senses can be tricked using genjutsu, and that would make you cause errors, which is unacceptable in a battle. Don't hesitate. Even a momentary hesitation in the middle of a battle can become a cause of your death. Is this all your strength? Such an attack won't even smash a bone, much less defeat or kill a shinobi. Using sand to protect just your vitals, then exchanging injuries is indeed a good tactic. But what will you do if the opponent is using some kind of poison? You will be the first to go down should that happen. Kuroto trained Gaara all while instructing and correcting his errors. In Kuroto's view, at a young age of less than 10, one doesn't need to spend too much effort or chakra to learn all kinds of flashy ninjutsu. What children of young age actually need to learn is the physical form of combat, which include taijutsu, shurikenjutsu, kenjutsu, bokujutsu, etc., as well as chakra control to increase efficiency. These types of physical training can not only hone a ninja's physique and willpower, but will also increase their insight, battle analysis skills, and judgment skills to determine the best course of actions or moves to defeat the enemy with no or minimal losses. And these skills are exactly what makes a shinobi an exceptional shinobi. This is why Kuroto did not let Gaara waste his time learning to control a greater and greater amount of sand. Rather, Kuroto made Gaara maintain control over a small volume of sand at all times. The volume of sand one can control is never the key, at least in Kuroto's understanding. What's important or deciding factor in a battle is the accuracy, speed, and density of the sand that is controlled. As for the matter of quantity, when Gaara grows up, he will also gain complete control over Shikaku in his body, so the amount of chakra will not be a problem for him. The chakra of Shikaku is naturally based on sand control, so Gaara will be able to control as much sand as he wants. He might as well be able to control an entire desert if he feels like it. To improve the speed and accuracy of sand control, there are no shortcuts, only regular small improvements through long-term continuous practice. And this kind of exercise can not only hone his chakra control but will also allow his body to adapt to sand control subconsciously. Over time, maintaining control over sand that generally requires concentration will become an instinct or something like an involuntary muscle movement where Gaara wouldn't have to put even any effort to effortlessly control sand to his liking. But of course, he is still quite far from reaching that point. Bang! With a muffled sound, the wooden shurnai in Kuroto's hand hit the sand protecting Gaara's shoulder, but it did not cause him any injury as the sand was able to bear the brunt of the attack and nullify the kinetic energy in the wooden shurnai. Kuroto nodded while tapping the shurnai on his shoulder. Very good. Your control over the sand has become significantly faster and better compared to a month ago. Huff huff. As soon as Kuroto's words fell, Gaara collapsed to the ground in tiredness. His chest was rising and falling. Despite all this, his immature face had a joyous expression. It seemed that the exhaustion of the body was nothing compared to Kuroto's praise. I wonder if I should tell him the truth, sighed Kuroto upon looking at Gaara's expression, at the same time at the squirming sand around him. Kuroto knows that even if Gaara doesn't take the initiative to control it, the sand around him that contains his mother's chakra would protect him. But it's just this protection is only effective against the likes of Genin and Chunin level shinobi. If Gaara were to encounter an enemy at the level of Tokubetsu Jonin, or that of higher strength, then the sand protecting him wouldn't be able to keep up with the enemy's attack speed. The same thing happened in the second round of the Chunin exam arc. In the battle between Gaara and Rock Lee, after Rock Lee removed the extra weights, his speed faintly exceeded the level of what Gaara's sand protection could keep up with. And when Rock Lee opened the first 4 gates from the 8 inner gates formation, Gaara's sand could no longer keep up with Rock Lee's attack speed. So just relying on the autonomous protection of sand, Gaara may be able to run wild at the level of Genin and Chunin, but the higher level he goes, and the more difficult opponents he encounters, the autonomous sand protection would no longer be able to keep up, and it will result in a similar passive situation he had during the Chunin exams. While Kuroto was pondering over a few things, at this time, Gaara recovered his breath and stood up. Kuroto-sama, what you said is really true. After reducing the volume of sand, the control has become much better than before. Kuroto nodded and said, right, don't waste chakra in creating sand armor. For now, you have to learn how to defend against all types of attacks using the minimum amount of sand necessary in combination with taijutsu. The tanuki in your body has been sealed by me, so with your current chakra amount, controlling too much sand will not be as effective, or rather it would be burdensome. As such, you must learn to get around your disadvantages and turn them into an advantage. As long as you make the sand dense enough, even the mightiest of attacks can be resisted. Gaara nodded in a respectful tone. I will keep that in mind, Kuroto-sama. Kuroto continued as he drew back the shurnai in his hand. Remember, whether you are eating, sleeping, playing, or doing any other thing, you must always maintain control sand around you. Make it into a habit, then slowly an involuntary muscle movement, then finally into an instinct. Gaara nodded and got ready for another round of training. Come on, Garkuin. You can do it. Show him who's the boss. At this time, a cheering voice sounded from the side. Hearing this voice, Kuroto looked at the source of the voice, then sighed. Kuroto had to admit that he somewhat underestimated the physique of the Uzumaki people. The scrawny and afraid little girl that had suffered too much in Kyuzugaku before Kuroto took her under his wing is no longer the same. The rehabilitation of the past few months, along with the more than appropriate diet that she has had in this period, has completely changed the girl. Karen, who used to be skinny, bony, and sickly pale, has now become quite chubby with visible baby fat on the cheeks, and a healthy rosy color complexion, much like a healthy young girl of her age should be. Overall, Kuroto would even say that now she has become too cute and would definitely attract quite a bit of attention from the members of opposite genders. But all that aside, there's one problem with all of this. As the days have passed, this girl is expanding like the Akimichi people, and Kuroto can't have that. Kuroto raised his face and said, "Karen-chan, I want you on the training field. Right now." "What?" Karen, who was holding cheesecake in her left hand, and a stick containing dango dumplings in her right hand, suddenly opened her mouth in shock. Even the crumbs of cheesecake on her mouth fell to the ground. "What are you staring in a daze for? Come here," said Kuroto with a stern tone, and continued, "From today onwards, your formal training as a kunoichi will start. If you are unable to keep up with the daily training schedule, you will have to go to sleep on an empty stomach." Hearing Kuroto's words, Karen hurriedly put aside the remaining cheesecakes and dango dumplings. Then, after whispering a few words to the Kazakage puppet who was dressed as a nanny, she came to the training field. Hunger and an empty stomach will often bring back painful memories of her time at Kyuzugaku, which is something Karen doesn't want to remember. Kuroto stared at Karen, then asked, "I take it that you have completed all the basic tasks I assigned you?" Karen said, "I have learned calligraphy, as well as completed the mathematics part of the syllabus assigned to me." Kuroto nodded, then said, "And, are you able to run chakra through your whole body smoothly?" "Yes, Kuroto-sama." Karen nodded and also demonstrated it. "Very good." After a nod, Kuroto said, "Your basic lessons will be similar to Garakuen, and will involve taijutsu training along with chakra control exercise to increase your chakra control." Karen quickly asked, "Should I also practice the same form of taijutsu as Garakuen that involves sand control?" Kuroto shook his head. "No, that style will be unique to Garakuen, as only he can manipulate sand. You will have to choose some other form of combat that would match your style." Karen tilted her head to the side and said with a confused tone, "But I don't know what style would suit me." Kuroto thought a little, then said, "For now we can start with strengthening your basic physique and combat analysis skills, but sooner or later you will have to figure out a combat style of your own, as your training schedule will be designed accordingly. Understand?" Karen nodded. "I understand, but Kuroto-sama, how do I figure out what's the best style for me?" Kuroto said, "There is no best style for anyone at the start. One has to experience different combat styles and then figure out accordingly. Once you figure out which combat style you want to use, you will have to adapt yourself to that style and slowly improve yourself to make yourself the best at it." Karen nodded. "All right, I will that in mind, Kuroto-sama." Kuroto then said, "The style of combat aside, there is one thing I want you to continue to learn and master, and that is Fuinjutsu. You are an Uzumaki and Fuinjutsu is in your blood. So, Fuinjutsu is a field where you will definitely progress rapidly, so do not stop your studies of Fuinjutsu." "Yes, Kuroto-sama." Karen nodded happily. With that understood, Kuroto formally started Karen's training too. After instructing a few key points, Kuroto left 2 shadow clones, one for each one of the 2 kids, then left the training hall. After all, the 2 kids are still far from reaching the point where Kuroto would need to put more than a shadow clone's worth of effort to train them. After dealing with this, Kuroto walked towards the outer platform of the Sky Fortress, and after opening a small hole in the enchantment, Kuroto allowed the 2 crows waiting outside to enter inside Anchor Vantion.